Welcome back as we get ready to head into week 2 this week with some great games ahead of us. But looking back at week 1, there were some interesting games from 8A through 3A that really took us by surprise. We'll start in 8-man where we saw Milford Cisna Park take care of Flanagan-Cornell-Woodland 67-16. That was definitely one of those games that we thought would be a better matchup with MCP starting off ranked number 5 in the state and Flanagan starting off at number 10. But clearly, MCP and the Bearcats have another idea coming, and a lot of people are already picking them to be one of those teams that will definitely be a state title contender. And of course, that's nothing new as we see them win the 2018 state championship. They were runner-ups in 2019, and then in 2021 they actually lost to eventual state champion Polo 62-52 in the quarterfinals. So not a big surprise to see them there, but the ability and the way that they beat Flanagan-Cornell-Woodland was a huge surprise. Milledgeville had a 46-8 win over Orangeville. Orangeville is last year's state runner-up. Milledgeville came out with 46 points in the first half alone to get the clock running to start the second half. Orangeville scoring a touchdown late in the game on the second string for Milledgeville. And then Amboy with the surprising upset of Polo 28-12. Polo, the two-time defending state champion, goes down to the Clippers. Obviously, that was a game that we felt could go either way. We did have Polo slightly favored in that game, but Amboy took care of business early, and it was enough to stake the claim as they controlled both facets of the game, or all facets of the game against Polo. In Class 1A, a big surprise down in the WIVC was Camp Point Central beating Carrollton 43-0. Carrollton, last year's Class 1A state runner-up, goes down by a running clock to Camp Point Central. Tuscola upends Arcola in the Battle of the Cola Wars. We felt that Arcola would be a team that, coming off of a quarterfinal run, returning quite a bit of players back this year, that they would have a decent run again here in Class 1A. But Tuscola letting everybody know that they haven't gone away. They win that one 30-13. And then the biggest one probably is Marquette over Aurora Christian 26-20. It's the first time that Aurora Christian has lost in Class 1A to a team outside of Lena Winslow since 2005 in the playoffs. So it's been a long time since Aurora Christian has lost to a 1A school and not named Lena Winslow, but Marquette takes care of business 26-20 in that one. Down in Class 2A, Vandalia upends Pana 34-10. Had a lot coming back with Pana. Thought that their good playoff run last year would see that success continue forward, but Vandalia gets the best of them there. And then Mercer County comes out with a 24-8 win over Farmington. Another game where we felt Farmington, being one of the leaders out of the Lincoln Trail Conference, would have a better showing in 2022 as well. But Mercer County is starting to prove that they're ready for some big things here in 2022 as well. Good win there. In Class 3A, we saw defending state champion Byron go down 15-7 in overtime to their rival, Stillman Valley, which was a huge turnaround from last year's game where Byron won that one 35-0. And then Prairie Central taking care of Tolono Unity in Illini Prairie action 34-12. A lot of people were riding high on Tolono Unity. Some of their fan base or players were giving us some grief for not having them very high in our rankings, even though they were in our rankings, thinking that we were overlooking them. Well, this is what happens when you worry about rankings. You go out there and you get your butt kicked in. So Prairie Central, good job on that 34-12 win. Obviously, we've had some other items come out with the state rankings coming out. In the AP poll, Lena Winslow is number 1 once again in Class 1A. In Class 2A is Wilmington, the defending state champs, are the team to be named #1 there. And in Class 3A, as expected with Byron's loss, IC Catholic moves up that one spot to the new #1 ranking. We're getting a lot of grief as well on Twitter on why we have Wilmington and Nashville in Class 3A and not 2A, and the AP has it all that they're in 2A. Let me remind you guys that just because we have a team ranked in one class or another, that does not mean that's where they're going to end up come playoff time. That's just where our projected cutoff point is in order to have a place for the state rankings to take place. Taking a quick look at what the AP has done, it almost looks like they basically used last year's cutoffs as this year's starting point for the playoffs. Talking to quite a bit of people, Athens last year was Class 1A. Right now we have them sitting in our Class 2A state rankings. The AP has them in Class 1A. But if you take a look and see where a lot of these teams are going and lining up, and you start to take a look at what teams can make the playoffs and what teams can't make the playoffs, the likelihood of Athens being in 2A or Nashville and Wilmington being in Class 3A really isn't that far-fetched. You take a look at the historical information as far as where the cutoffs have been. I mean, we started our Class 1A cutoff point at 312. The average over the past 15 years has been 308. So we're starting a little high there ourselves. You take a look at the Class 2A cutoff, on average it's been right around 402. We have it at 408.5, so there again we're still starting it higher than where the average has been. And even Class 3A, I mean, we're right there at like 548, 550, somewhere around there. We did just bring Princeton into our Class 3A state rankings simply because where our cut point was and where they sat, they were just one man over. And the likelihood that they do get into 3A is probably pretty high, especially if you take a look at some of these teams like Athens. If Athens gets into Class 1A per se, it's going to drop other teams down, and you're going to see Princeton fall into 3A. But there again, they're still a bubble team. They very easily could fall into the 4A playoff field as well. So, it's too early to tell where teams are going to be and where they're not going to be. All you can do is go up based off of projections. And our NUICfootball.com projections are just a little bit different from what the AP is doing. And that's fine, because if I wanted to do what the AP was doing, I would just throw out the AP state rankings and say, here you go. That's not what we're doing. We're putting together our poll so you guys can see the difference in how myself and my panel members vote the state rankings compared to what the AP does. I mean, we get a lot of feedback on the AP's a joke and blah, blah, blah. And, that's why we do our state rankings. We feel that between our panel members, there's just a lot more knowledge and information going into that state ranking to give you a better argument or debate point on which teams to actually watch for when we get to the playoffs. So that's where that information comes from. Hopefully it makes it a little bit more clear for you guys to understand why we have certain teams where we have them. But in all essence, some of these teams, the Nashvilles, the Wilmingtons, the Princetons, the Athens, the Shelbyvilles, they're bubble teams, and anything can happen when you get on that bubble. You see it every year, all the time. I mean, 1A at 319 last year was the highest it's been since 2009 when it was at 326. But it's not like we haven't seen it there. You take a look at teams that have dropped from 11-man football into 8-man football, And sometimes that's the swaying factor, right? I mean, this year I believe there's 491 teams that are eligible to make the IHSA playoffs, which is the lowest number it's ever been in the playoff history. So that will play a determining factor. But when you take a look at the 11-man teams that have dropped to 8-man football for 2022, it was only like 4 teams that went to 8-man, or 6 teams. They weren't playoff teams anyway. So it's the only thing that it's going to do is take away a potential win from another team that was originally on their schedule, and either they're going to get an opponent that they can beat, or it's going to be an opponent that they're going to lose to. But when you take a look at the history of it all, 85% of last year's playoff field will get back into the playoffs again the following year. That part has not changed. That's been a pretty consistent average over the years, taking a look at everything since it's evolved into an 8-class system. So, the teams that are there pretty much every year. And the teams that get in for the first time in how many years typically aren't a huge team to make a big push for a state championship run anyhow either. So, there's so many variables that can take place and change things. And it's funny, well, Wilmington they're 2A. Well, can you tell me where the cutoff point is going to be? Because really they're a bubble team. So it's funny, it's interesting, but that's why we have them where we have them in our state rankings. Like I said, if we wanted to be the AP, we would just throw their votes out there and say, here you go. That's not what we do. Anyway, we have a good docket of NUIC games coming up, both 8-man and 11-man, and we're going to break those down right now. The first game we're going to talk about is going to be Orangeville at Polo. Orangeville is going to enter this game with an 0-1 record, and the Marcos are going to come into this game with an 0-1 record as well. Orangeville lost to Milledgeville last week 46-8, whereas Polo lost to Amboy 28-12. These two teams met one time last season, and that was for the state championship game, where Polo won this game 12-7. When you take a look at what both teams are right now, obviously Polo was ranked number 1 to start the season, lost to Amboy, who started ranked number 2. So it's not a surprising loss, to say the least. We expect big things out of Amboy, but Polo still has the ingredients to be a very good team as we move forward through the season. They're very formidable. They had opportunities in that loss to Amboy that they just did not capitalize on. Part of it due to their inability to make the plays happen, and part of it was due to Amboy's defense was really that good and was able to offset what the Marcos could or couldn't do. You take a look with both their running backs and Solto and Grenoble in there, and then they had Caden Webster at quarterback, which was not the move that we were expecting. We were pretty much predicting that Carter Murdian would be the QB, but Coach Alston put Caden Webster in there, which, hey, it's his ball club, it's his team. He needs to do what he wants, but you could definitely see that there were some areas that the line play did not open up the holes that Polo is used to having from a year before. So there's definitely some things that they need to work on. That loss was not a bad loss. I would consider that a good loss because, one, it brings you back down to where you can now, okay, we're not that good yet, but we have the ability to be that good, and you can take the takeaways from that game to work on it to make you stronger as the season goes on. As for Orangeville, the Broncos have a lot to look at. They did move Gavin Roth from the offensive line into the fullback position, which, for his first go-around, he did okay. Had a few carries for, I think, 20 yards or so. So the output wasn't there. He is definitely a big beast to take down, but there again, Orangeville has to focus on line play. They have to focus on getting their kids to the next level, but not stopping as well. That's one of the biggest takeaways I saw in the game that they had with Milledgeville is they would get their one block in, and it was like a push, a shove, and then I stop blocking, and then the defensive player goes and makes that play anyway. So you got to complete the play. Until the whistle blows, you should always have your body on another body getting in the way, trying to make holes for yourselves. And unfortunately, Orangeville's got a lot of youth that they have to work with, and they have to be able to generate that. And it does very well could be a growing pains kind of year for the Broncos, but they hope to bounce back. Obviously, this game against Polo is not going to be in their favor, in my opinion. I feel that Polo's definitely got a lot more experience. Like I said, their loss was a good loss, not a bad loss. Orangeville's loss was a bad loss. I like the Marcos in this game, and I feel it's going to be a pretty large sum. I would say 4 scores in favor of Polo at this point. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, Orangeville can make a game out of it, because that would be great for the NUIC as we move forward into all the different 8-man action, especially with the new division realignment. But Polo's got the vote this week. Our next game is going to take us to Amboy, where the Clippers will play host to River Ridge. River Ridge comes in this game with an 0-1 record after they lost in 3 overtimes to South Beloit, 42-36. And Amboy comes in with that 1-0 record after they beat previously number 1 ranked Polo 28-12. These two teams did not meet up last year, so this is the first time that they're playing each other in the 8-man format. You take a look at what River Ridge did. They had some opportunities. They were up 12 or 14 to nothing at halftime. But the second half got away from them, and South Beloit was able to get back into that game. Obviously, take it 2-3 overtimes before getting that win. You take a look at some of the things that River Ridge probably could have done, and that would be eliminate the mistakes that they made. Talking to both Coach Nicholas and Coach Reese, they felt that they should have walked out of that game with the W, but they did not. And they got some things that they need to clean up. Again, they're a team that has a lot of youth, but they have a lot of skill players that have experience as well, and they need to rely on those skill players and the positional players to make the plays in order for them to be competitive this year. And unfortunately, that game with South Beloit was definitely one of those games that they needed to have in order for them to really get themselves into a playoff picture, especially when you take a look at their schedule for the season. It's a pretty tough schedule that they have in front of them. They still have quite a few big games here, and it starts off with Amboy this week, and then you have Aquin in week 4. A couple games there with Christian Life and Alden Hebron and Elgin Harvest over the next 5 weeks. Should help see River Ridge get at least 3 wins there. But then you finish up with Polo, Milledgeville, and Orangeville. And, the likelihood of River Ridge getting into the playoffs, they at least have to get to 4 wins. That's where the cutoff was last year, was 4-5 record, made the playoffs, and River Ridge did go 3-6 last year. Obviously, George Winter was their big playmaker for the Wildcats, led the team in tackles with 14, led the team in rushing yards. He had 2 touchdowns rushing the ball with 102 yards rushing. He also had a receiving touchdown for 40 yards. So that was a great output by George Winter there. For Amboy, Tucker Lindemeyer was named one of our 8-man player of the weeks. Had a big game both at quarterback, throwing the ball and passing the ball. He's able to connect with Brennan Blaine twice on a couple pass plays to get some touchdowns there. And then he also was able to get a big touchdown run as well to help lift Amboy to that big win over Polo and give the Clippers the #1 state ranking as we go into week 2. So, this game's going to be a tough one for River Ridge to look at. Obviously, Amboy's going to have the advantage both in speed and size. For River Ridge, they just have to be able to come, do what they can to minimize the chances that Amboy has offensively, try to control the clock and control the tempo of the game to keep it close. And, anything can happen when you keep a game close. But for Amboy, they look really good defensively. That defensive front with Quinn Luffelman at left end and Brennan Blaine at right end. And then you got your linebackers and then you got your defensive backfield there. And it's a pretty athletic, pretty strong defense that the Clippers have. Very impressive, and they definitely look like what we felt they would be in the preseason, a state title contender. They look every bit of that part. I do like Amboy in this game by 4 scores. Our 8-man game of the week is presented by Best Realty, your premier choice for buying or selling your home in Stevenson, Wynne, and Bagel County, including Lake Somerset. Features the Aquin Bulldogs at the Milledgeville Missiles. Aquin comes in this game 0-1 after they lost in overtime to West Prairie 39-38, and Milledgeville comes in with a 1-0 record after they destroyed Orangeville 46-8 last week. Last year, Milledgeville won this game 48-28. I remember predicting that Milledgeville would win this game by 20 points, and my buddy Blaze Grease said, "Oh my gosh, you picked it right on." Well, I got lucky, really, but I just had a feeling that Milledgeville was 3 scores better than Aquin, and it happened to play out. It was exactly the 20 points that I had predicted. But, you take a look at this matchup, and you would think that Aquin and Milledgeville last year would have been a pretty good game, pretty close game, but it was just the way that the Missiles were playing last year really set that tone on what felt like would be a big runaway game, especially after seeing what they could do once they got the ball rolling. This year, there was a lot of uncertainty with the Missiles. You knew you had Connor Nye back. You knew you had Bryce Audie back, but then Bryce Audie has ankle surgery and he's out for the season, which changes the whole dynamic of what Milledgeville had going with them. You knew Kason Johnson was returning as well, which was excellent for Milledgeville to get him back, but the only other one that you could really rely on that you knew coming back was Eric Ebersole on their defensive and offensive lines. So there was a lot of holes that Milledgeville needed to fill in, and they've done that. Micah Tom Smith has done a great job and seems to have improved dramatically from last year to this year, and has helped be able to fill a spot with Audie gone. Kason Johnson has really stepped up into that role, and then their offensive and defensive lines have done an exceptional job being able to protect Connor Nye, allow him to make the plays that we're used to seeing him make, and led to a big win. Obviously, that big win was sparked by the opening kickoff return by Kason Johnson, and then later he had 2 punt returns for what would ultimately be a total of 206 return yards for him, as he was also named our other 8-man player of the week. So huge performance for Mr. Johnson as he helped propel the Missiles to that huge win. As for Aquin, West Prairie was one of those games that had to be a must-win game. Definitely marked on the calendar as a game that they could win. We had Aquin predicted at 4-5, so not getting that win pretty much puts their prediction at 3-6. But you gotta take what you can from where you're at, and Aquin has to be able to battle back now. They had that loss. They had the lead late in the fourth quarter, 32-20. West Prairie came back and was able to get it tied up with 15 seconds left in the game, and then ultimately win that one in overtime with a PAT kick to get her done. So this game, though, Aquin and Milledgeville, on paper, it says it's a dynamic matchup, but really, I feel that Milledgeville is a 3-touchdown favorite in this game. All right, moving over to the 11-man side, our first game we're going to talk about is Madison at Galena. Madison did not play a game last week, taking ultimately what was considered a bye week, so their record still 0-0, while Galena fell to 0-1 with their 31-12 loss to Fulton. Last year, Galena won this game 36-0, and quite honestly, I don't think we're going to see much different. We've been able to have the luxury, or lack thereof, of seeing Madison play an NUIC team almost every year since 2017, and the only time that they did win was the first time that they played Du-Pec, and really that was a game that Du-Pec should have won. It was a game that they were, in the beginning of their co-op, so they were still trying to figure out what they were and how they played. But since then, the NUIC has dominated Madison ever since, and I don't think this week is going to be much different. I think the Pirates will get themselves righted to a 1-1 record as they get ready for their Week 3 showdown with Galena-Winslow. This should be a good momentum builder game for Galena. Allow them to figure out the pieces that they need to have in place, bounce back from that big loss to Fulton, and get prepared for the next third of the season, as they got some good games coming up: Galena-Winslow, Stockton, and Forreston after this week with Madison. So Galena big in this one. Next game will take us to Dakota, where they will play host to Galena-Winslow. This was once the rivalry game in the conference, and since 2015, it's pretty much taken the tide to Galena-Winslow, and you really can't talk much about rivalries when there isn't a game that's really taken place, unfortunately, and Dakota's been on the bottom side of that for quite a while now. Galena-Winslow and Dakota both will enter this game with 1-0 records. Galena-Winslow taking care of business as expected over EPC with a 60-6 win last week, and Dakota came out in impressive fashion against Christ the King, winning 61-16. Obviously, that was a game we definitely had picked and figured Dakota would win, but the way they went about winning it was more of a surprise than anything. And it's definitely the win that you would expect an NUIC team to have over a team like Christ the King as well. Last year, Galena-Winslow won this game 46-0, and you take a look at some of the things that Dakota has done different this year compared to last year. Last year, they were mostly spread, didn't have a lot of guys that were playing out, so they had a lot of guys that were playing out of position, like Adam Thompson had always been a tight end. He was moved to the line. A couple other guys were moved to the line that had never played line before. And that was just so that the Indians could fill some holes, because they just did not have the athletes out. Obviously, Coach Free's gone. Coach Sheets is in. More kids are back out playing football, which is great for the Indian program. They have had a few kids quit since the beginning of the year, but it is what it is at this point. They still have a good amount of kids that are out for football. They're growing what they need to have going in the right direction, and they've changed their offensive looks. They're running a double wing offense, which if you don't have the size or you don't have the athletes, one of the best offenses to run is the wing offense, whether it's the wing T or the double wing. It doesn't really matter. It allows you to use misdirection and the ability to just get a body on a body to create a hole. And it's a really good offense that can be effective in a lot of ways. Now, you also have to have some guys up front that can, make some things happen with their size, and you got to have backs that are quick and hit the hole. And that's one thing that Dakota does have this year is they do have speed threats, especially in Adrian Arellano, and then you got Tommy Bowman at fullback, and then you have Phoenix Blakely and a couple others switching in at wingback. So they do have the speed there. At ends, you got Nolan Mayberry and Case Rocky. Both guys can go out, get the ball. Good athletes that will go up and get it. And you got Caden Niedermeyer back at quarterback as well. So with Caden Niedermeyer there, he's able to get the ball down the field. He can also take off and run as well. He's pretty shifty himself, able to make things happen. The thing is that Lena Winslow is still Lena Winslow. And, there's a lot of upside to what Dakota has, as they were able to match Lena Winslow in their 7-on-7 play this summer. That's excellent. You have to be able to compete, especially when you go to those 7-on-7s. The problem I have with 7-on-7s is while there's a good thing for them to take place and practice on, you're not playing real football. You don't have an offensive or defensive line that you're going up against. You don't really have a pass rush that you're going up against. So your ability to make plays is really beat your man and get open, or beat the zone and get down the seam. You put pads on everybody, and you get an offensive and defensive pass rush going, and you get an offensive and defensive line in there with a defensive pass rush coming at you, and it changes the way the game is played. And Lena Winslow is going to be the stronger team up front on both sides of the ball. And, even at their skill positions, they're just overall, the strength advantage is definitely going to favor Lena Winslow. And to be honest, I feel that Lena Winslow is still at least a 4-touchdown favorite over Dakota in this game. Our next game will take us to EPC, where the Wildcats will play host to Stockton. Both teams will enter this game with 0-1 records, as Stockton lost to Forreston 44-14, and EPC lost to Lena Winslow 60-6. Last year, this is a game that Stockton won 18-13, while both teams went on to subpar performances, missing out on the playoffs. Stockton finished the season with a 3-6 record. EPC finished at 1-8. But if you take a look at some of the games that EPC played, their 1-8 record, they could have been a 4-5 team as well. You take a look at Stockton, they had one loss in there to Dakota that probably could have propelled them to a 4-5 record. But either way you look at it, you're chalking it up. You're still towards the bottom of the conference, and at 4-5, you're not making the playoffs. So, those things might change as our playoff eligibility teams keep coming down. Right now, I believe Susie has projected that there will be a possibility of 12 4-5 teams to make the playoffs, but that's going off of week 1 results. You're only 1 week in. It's the worst time to be chalking up who's going to be where as far as playoffs are concerned. It's the least consistent week to be doing playoff predictions in, because there's so many variables with just 1 week in. Just because you're 0-1 now doesn't mean you can't turn that around and become 8-1 down the road. Granted, you could be 0-1 right now and end up going 4-7 4-5 or 3-6. That there's just too many variables right now, and there's a lot of good teams that are 0-1 right now that we know will make the playoffs. Case in point, Rockridge is a team. They lost to Princeton in week 1. Princeton's ranked in Class 3A. Rockridge is ranked in Class 2A. Princeton was expected to win that game, but we're still expecting Rockridge to make the playoffs as they are a state-ranked team or a team that's still receiving votes to be state-ranked even as we go into week 2. So there's a lot of those variables that take place. Arcola losing to Tuscola. Arcola is still a big favorite in their conference to win it. So, week 1's hard. It's very hard to do playoff predictions with. It's why I don't even try to attempt it myself. But you take a look at these two teams, obviously a lot of changes. You take a look at what EPC has done. They got on the board early against Galena-Winslow, but obviously it just wasn't enough as the Panthers took care of business as expected and almost the exact same way they did the year before with a huge, huge win there. Stockton was the biggest surprise, getting clocked by Forreston, giving up 44 points within the first 2 and 3 quarters of a quarter. Really, we thought that Stockton would be more competitive. And you talk to different people that have seen Stockton play or know things about Stockton, and they're like, yeah, this team can do these things. It starts to make you wonder what's going on with the Blackhawks and why they're where they're at. But, Coach Lightson usually does a very good job. He did an excellent job at West Carroll, taking teams that were mediocre at best and putting them in the best situations possible in order to get wins, get into the playoffs, make some noise against some top teams in the playoffs. And you just hope that he can do the same thing at Stockton as well and turn the tide. This week, obviously, it's going to be another good game. Coach McNutt feels that his defense is very good. Obviously, they did show some good things with Galena-Winslow. It's hard to show a lot of positives when you're going up against a team to the caliber of Galena-Winslow as well. I do still feel that Stockton is going to win this game. They were my original pick in this game at the start of the season, and I feel that they'll be at least a touchdown favorite over EPC this week. West Carroll gets to return home this week as they will play host to Fulton. Fulton comes in with a 1-0 record after they beat Galena 31-12, whereas West Carroll is 0-1 after they lost to Du-Pec 53-6. Obviously, these two teams did not play a season ago with West Carroll sitting out the 2021 season. You take a look at how West Carroll played against Du-Pec. There's a lot of positives that I've heard with West Carroll, and a lot of them were, they fought hard. They kept the score close through the first quarter with the Rivermen. They never gave up, which is huge, especially considering that they rely on a lot of juniors and sophomores, which can be a very tall task when you're playing varsity level football against teams at the caliber of Du-Pec. And you're doing that week in and week out. That's not something that West Carroll is definitely geared for at the moment, but it's something that they're going to have to deal with and continue to build upon. So hearing the positives out of what the Thunder did last Friday night is a great thing, and Coach Clark can only build upon that, and hopefully his kids see what they did as well, because those are the building blocks that get you to where you want to be. And as you got numbers starting to come out for the Thunder. You want to be able to keep them interested, keep them positive, even through the trials of the season that they're about to go through. You just got to keep improving week by week and getting yourself better. And you know, maybe next year or 2 years from now, you start seeing that building block keep continuing to rise. And that's all you can ask for as you're trying to rebuild the program from the ashes up. And that's what West Carroll's doing right now. Fulton, obviously, a big win over Galena, proving why they're state ranked. Obviously, this week in the AP polls, they move up to number 7. In our NUICfootball.com poll, they're ranked number 4. And the Steamers are a very good team. We look for Fulton to be there as far as at the end of the season being one of those teams that can make a good playoff run. Obviously, they have a very, very tough schedule ahead. Not just with the NUIC stuff, but with their non-conference game with Muskegon Catholic Central as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Fulton does, but this week they should roll. Obviously, after this week, the gauntlet picks up as they have Du-Pec, Muskegon Catholic Central, and then Galena-Winslow in weeks 3, 4, and 5. So the picture definitely tightens up here after this one. I do like Fulton in this one big, though, as expected. Our best Realty game of the week takes us to Forreston, where Du-Pec comes to town with a 1-0 record after they beat West Carroll 53-6. And Forreston also comes in 1-0 with a big win over Stockton 44-14. Last year, this game was played in Pecatonica, where Du-Pec won 28-0. It was the first time that the Rivermen had beat Forreston in their co-op history, but it was also one of those stepping stones that the Rivermen needed to take in order to get themselves to the next level of play and help propel them to that conference championship level that they were seeking. Obviously, this year is going to be a little bit different. Du-Pec lost a lot of firepower from last year. Forreston returns quite a bit from last year, despite losing some key pieces. The Cardinals are definitely geared for a big run, as are the Rivermen. So this definitely is a huge game for both teams, as it's early in the season, and it's hard to say this, but this is definitely one of those must-win games in order to stay in competition for that conference championship. Obviously, for the playoffs, the only thing this game does is give you better playoff seeding with your wins, but with the conference championship on the line and Galena-Winslow still looming in the shadows for both these teams, you got to be able to get this one in week 2. Du-Pec ran everything out of the Wildcat last week. I keep hearing, is that what Du-Pec's running this year? Is that what Du-Pec's running this year? My guess is probably not. I mean, have we ever really seen Du-Pec run straight Wildcat all year long? And that answer is no. I would expect to see Du-Pec running their offense with what they know how to do, and that's to go spread and try to run 60% of the game out of the spread. And then, the other 40% of the time you're going to try and throw the ball. Obviously, we know what Forreston's going to do. Double wing, and double wing. And that's lead, dive, trap, push, pull, shove, whatever you want to call it. Forreston's going to do what Forreston always does. And that's going to be a high-tempo offense and shove it down your face, run, 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 substitute, platoon in, get as many ball carries in there as possible, keep fresh legs, keep the ball moving, keep the chains moving, and do what they can to control the tempo and the score of the game. Obviously, you take a look at some of the changes Forreston's done. They moved Johnny Kobler to a fullback position, taking him off the line and putting a ball in his hands, and he rewarded them with a pretty good game with 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it was a great effort by Johnny in that one there. Obviously, they got some good key contributions out of players that we expect them to, with Micah Nelson, McKeon Crace, and Caleb Sanders. So, the things that we expected Forreston to do and the players that we expected to be the go-to guys were in week 1. And then we got a couple surprises too. So, obviously, Forreston was doing what we expect them to do. They find the pieces that they need to put into the cog to make the wheel work, and away they go. And that's what they do. I mean, their offense is plug and play. You just got to have the right plug in the right play spot, and away they go. Du-Pec, on the other hand, big things out of A.J. Mulcahy, our player of the week, 4'11" man, with 235 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns. And you expect him to continue to make those things, those types of plays and games happen, as we expect AJ to have a huge year, especially in the absence of Trenton Taylor, as he puts himself in that area in order to help the Rivermen keep moving forward. And I'm really excited for this game. It's definitely a must-see game if you're don't have a game to go to and you're not committed to be anywhere. This would be the game you need to be at. It's obviously our marquee matchup for the entire week this week, as we have some bigger games starting to come into the horizon beginning next week. But for this week, Du-Pec at Forreston is definitely the game. I do like Du-Pec on the road. I have them as a 1-score favorite, 6 points to be exact. That's why I put it on Facebook anyway. But I do like Du-Pec in this one. I do expect a closer game than what it was last year. I would expect Forreston to be prepared for anything and everything that Du-Pec has ran, whether it be the Wildcat or the spread offense that we're used to seeing them run. I don't think you never see gadget stuff out of Forreston. They're pretty much stick to playing home defense and relying on the trust and abilities of the guys around them to make their plays and hold up to their end of the responsibility. So, like I said, I like Du-Pec by a score. All right, that gives you a look at what we have coming up here in week 2. Obviously, some big games last week around the state led to some changes in the state rankings, and we have both our NUICfootball.com rankings posted on our website at NUICfootball.com, and they've been shared on our social media pages on Facebook and on Twitter. You can also take a look at both those sites for our AP polls, as what, or for, not for our AP polls, but for the AP polls, as we have posted the week 2 AP polls on both social media fronts also. Lots of big games coming up. Some, it's only week 2, but there's some must-win games already showing face, and making the football season even more interesting as we get ready to go full bore here as we start to enter week 3, and it's only week 2. But great games coming up. Get out to the games. As always, root for the NUIC.